this book, and it continues to very much today. What do you think of the deal Secretary of State Kerry is working on to negotiate tentative nuclear agreements with Iran?
Well, I think that the United States had no choice but to sit down at the table with the Iranians once they offered to negotiate. The question is what kind of an agreement comes out at the end of it, and I think that's the hard part is still in front of us. First, I think there ought to be a firm deadline at 6 months. I think the Iranians are world-class experts in slow rolling their negotiating partners or adversaries in terms of, well, let's take another month, let's take another 2 months, let's take another 3 months. So I think there's a risk of this negotiation dragging out as the Iranians continue certain parts of their nuclear program. The other piece of it is whether the negotiations roll back enough of the Iranian nuclear program that they are not a nuclear weapon threshold state. So I totally support going to the negotiating table, but everything depends on a successful outcome to those negotiations 6 months from now.
Well, what do you think of the Senate efforts to impose new sanctions to increase the pressure on Iran right now?
I think that the idea of imposing new sanctions right now is a terrible mistake and would be a strategic error. On the other hand, I do disagree with the administration in this respect. I think that the Senate or the Congress voting severe new sanctions, but sanctions that would be triggered only by failure of the negotiations would strengthen the president's negotiating hand. You know, I hear the argument that that would strengthen the hand of hawks in Iran and opponents of the negotiations. Well, maybe the Iranians ought to worry about the potential consequences of strengthening the hawks in the United States. But I think any new sanctions need to be conditioned and triggered by the failure of the negotiations.
Secretary Gates, you